It was early December when I first sensed something wasn't right. The air had that crisp bite that comes before the holidays. My daughter-in-law had posted photos of their Christmas tree on social media, lights twinkling like captured stars against their living room wall. The tree stood in the corner of what used to be my living room, in the house I'd bought decades ago with my late wife. But I hadn't heard a single word from my son in weeks, not even a casual text or quick call. I'm a 72-year-old widower named Tom Whitman, a retired schoolteacher with silver hair that's thinned over the years and a calm voice that still carries the patient tone from 40 years of teaching 7th graders. My late wife Margaret and I bought our suburban home back when houses were affordable and dreams felt within reach, a place full of memories we built together. When my son Marcus got married 5 years ago, he begged desperately to live there just for a while until he saved enough for his own place. Years passed like water through a sieve, and he stayed rent-free while I covered every expense. I finally picked up the phone and called him, my fingers trembling slightly as I dialed. "Any Christmas plans this year?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He sighed heavy on the other end, like I was some kind of burden he'd been dreading. "Dad, maybe it's better if you sit this one out." My chest tightened like a fist squeezing my heart, crushing the air from my lungs. What did he mean by that? Pain hit quick and sharp. After everything I'd sacrificed for him, now this cold dismissal? I was about to find out exactly what he meant, and it would change absolutely everything between us forever. Just before you continue to watch, Joe would like you to subscribe to this channel and like this video. It would encourage him to keep his streak of thrilling revenge stories for you to watch. Alright, back to the story. I pressed him harder on the phone, my voice staying steady even though my hand shook against the receiver. Why would I skip Christmas with my own family? That's when he said the words that would haunt me for weeks afterward. "You'd just embarrass us in front of everyone we invited." His words hit harder than any physical punch could, like a slap across the face from someone you've trusted your whole life. I had raised this boy from infancy, taught him to read by lamplight at the kitchen table, given him everything I had including this very house he was living in. And now I was somehow a source of shame? My throat went completely dry, humiliation burning hot like acid reflux climbing up my chest. He ended the call quickly after that, like swatting away an annoying fly that wouldn't stop buzzing. I sat in my worn armchair for what felt like hours, just staring at the faded wallpaper, feeling the knife twist deeper with each passing moment. For 5 long years, I'd let him stay in my house without charging a single dollar in rent, covering property taxes and expensive repairs, thinking that's what family did for each other. Now this was my reward. Pain agitated like salt poured directly into a fresh, bleeding cut, my dignity shredded in one thoughtless sentence. But as the initial shock faded and anger began bubbling up from somewhere deep inside, suspense built in my mind. What if I completely flipped the script on him? What if I reminded him exactly how much he actually needed me? I was about to find out just how dependent he'd become on my generosity. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment's living room, staring at our old family photo still hanging on the wall in its tarnished frame. My wife Margaret had passed 10 years ago after a brutal fight with cancer that drained our savings and left me hollow inside, her warm smile now frozen in that photograph like a light that had been permanently switched off. I'd promised her on her deathbed, holding her frail hand as machines beeped around us, that I'd always hold this family together no matter what, keep the bond strong like super glue on fragile paper. I remembered the magical Christmases when she would cook enormous turkeys and homemade pies, the whole house filled with laughter and the smell of cinnamon, warmth filling these walls like music pouring from a radio. Our son Marcus running around excitedly with torn wrapping paper flying everywhere, his eyes bright as stars on Christmas morning when he was just an innocent kid. Now only silence echoed through these rooms instead, cold and empty as winter wind whistling through cracks in old window frames. Pain twisted deep in my gut. How had our relationship deteriorated so completely to this point? My own boy, my flesh and blood, calling me an embarrassment like I was dirt tracked in on his shoe. Years and years of teaching him right from wrong, saving every penny for his college education, sacrificing vacations and new cars so he could have opportunities, now carelessly tossed away like yesterday's garbage. A thought began forming in my mind, painful and sharp as a fresh blade cutting through confusion. What if I stopped holding on so tightly? What if I let go of the house, of him, of everything? Suspense built slowly in my chest. Could I really do something that drastic? And that uncomfortable thought would soon transform into concrete action, turning deep hurt into something solid and irreversible. The next morning arrived gray and cold, frost covering my apartment windows in delicate patterns. I walked slowly through the old house. My house, the one Marcus lived in without paying. My slippers whispering softly on the wood floors. I'd polished myself on hands and knees. Every single room carried a precious memory etched into its walls. Our son's very first wobbly steps in the narrow hallway, his little arms reaching out like a baby deer learning to walk, colorful birthday balloons stuck to the ceiling from parties long gone, their strings dangling like forgotten decorations. My wife's old sewing kit sitting by the window gathering dust, needles still threaded like she might pick it up any day and continue her work. Yet here I stood, completely alone, unwelcome at my own family's holiday table, cast aside carelessly like an old winter coat nobody wants anymore. Pain agitated deep inside, like a thorn stuck under skin that keeps twisting with each movement. My boy living completely rent-free in this valuable place, yet deliberately shutting me out of his life like I was some stranger. And then the realization struck me with perfect clarity. He wasn't just living near me geographically. He was living in my actual house, the one I'd bought decades ago with sweat and hard-earned savings, the title deed still legally in my name. Suspense hung heavy in the air around me. What if I sold it out from under him? Could I really pull that trigger and follow through? I was actually the one with all the power here, holding the property deed like a hidden ace up my sleeve. The thought grew bolder and more insistent, agitating alongside the fresh betrayal. Maybe it was time to see exactly how he liked being on the outside looking in for once. The critical fact was this: the house wasn't his property at all. I had bought it decades ago with Margaret, scraping together every single penny from our modest teaching salaries to somehow make the down payment on our American dream. It was our sanctuary, a cozy suburban spot with a big backyard perfect for summer barbecues and a wide front porch for rocking chairs where we'd planned to grow old together. When Marcus got married to his wife Amanda, he begged shamelessly to move in with promises and puppy dog eyes. "Just for a little while, Dad," he'd said earnestly. "Just until we save enough for our own place." 5 long years passed like sand steadily flowing through an hourglass, each grain another broken promise. He never paid a single dollar in rent, never once chipped in for utility bills or property taxes. I covered everything: taxes, regular maintenance, even the expensive new roof last summer when leaks started dripping through the ceiling like tears from heaven. Legally and officially, it was still completely mine. Every brick, every nail, every floorboard, the title crystal clear in my name at the county recorder's office. Pain twisted sharply in my chest. I'd given him a home, a place to build his family, and he repaid that generosity with shame and rejection. Betrayal agitated like a bee sting that wouldn't stop swelling no matter how much ice I applied. But suddenly, that legal fact felt incredibly powerful, like holding a key to a locked door he'd completely forgotten even existed. Suspense built steadily. What if I turned that key and opened everything up? The power I held was far more significant than he'd ever realized, certainly enough to completely flip the script on his comfortable, subsidized life. I drove downtown the very next day, my old pickup truck rumbling like a grumpy bear waking from hibernation, bouncing over potholes that the city never seemed to fix. I met with an old acquaintance, my lawyer, Franklin Dalton, in his cramped office lined with legal books standing like loyal soldiers on metal shelves. The air smelled of old paper and coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. I asked him plainly, getting straight to the point, what are my legal options if I want to sell the house my son lives in? He pulled the property deed from his organized files, scanning it quickly with reading glasses perched on his narrow nose like a bird. "It's still registered in your name, full and clear," he said with a slight smile of understanding. "You could list it on the market tomorrow morning. No liens against it, no legal issues whatsoever. It's yours to do with as you please." My heart pounded like a bass drum in my ears, the first real beat of excitement I'd felt in long, empty weeks. Pain from my son's cruel words still stung fresh, agitating like coarse salt dumped into a fresh, bleeding cut. Embarrass him? I'd built that home with love and sacrifice, poured my life into it, and he'd tossed me aside like I was worthless. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel completely powerless anymore, like a mouse suddenly realizing it could roar like a lion. Suspense coiled tight in my stomach. Would selling the house shatter our relationship forever, make the rift permanent and irreparable? The truth was simple and stark. I held all the cards in this game, and I was ready to play them when the timing felt exactly right. I didn't act immediately after that revealing lawyer's visit, my mind churning and processing like a slow engine gradually warming up on a cold morning. Pain from his dismissive words still stung sharp and persistent, like an angry bee that refused to stop buzzing in my ear. Embarrass me? After all I'd sacrificed for his comfort and success? Instead of rushing, I called a realtor friend, Patricia Hayes, asking her to give me a professional estimate on the house's current market value. She walked through the entire place that same afternoon, her heels clicking purposefully on the hardwood floors I'd laid myself one summer, whistling low and impressed as she noted the spacious, updated kitchen and well-maintained yard. "This is definitely a seller's market right now," she said enthusiastically, her eyes lighting up with dollar signs. "You'd have eager buyers lined up around the entire block, cash offers flying in within days." My chest warmed genuinely for the first time in many days, like winter sun finally breaking through heavy storm clouds. All those years of deliberate sacrifice, taking extra teaching hours for minimal pay, skipping family vacations we couldn't afford, fixing everything myself to save money. This house had appreciated and grown into something genuinely valuable, worth far more than what we'd originally paid. Valuable enough to completely change everything, to dramatically flip the script on his comfortable, entitled life. But suspense built steadily in my gut like gathering storm clouds. Could I really pull the trigger and go through with something this drastic? The only real question remaining was simple but profound. Would I actually do it, or let his cruelty slide like I'd always done before? December 20th arrived cold and gray, snow flurries dancing outside my window like forgotten confetti from a party nobody remembered. I received a generic holiday card from Marcus's family in the mail, a mass-produced Christmas scene on the glossy front with absolutely no personal touch or warmth. It was signed simply "From us to you," in Amanda's neat, careful handwriting, no personal note tucked inside, no warmth like the genuine hugs we used to freely share. No invitation included anywhere, nothing. They had clearly already planned their big, elaborate dinner, completely without me, like I was a ghost from the distant past they'd rather forget entirely. Pain agitated deep in my core, like deliberately twisting a knife in an old scar that had never properly healed. My own boy, my flesh and blood, shutting me out after I'd opened every single door for him throughout his entire life. I sat there at my small kitchen table, card held in my shaking hand, staring at the empty, meaningless words printed by machines, thinking hard. If I'm not family enough for their fancy table, then why am I continuing to shelter them under my roof, subsidizing their entire lifestyle? Suspense coiled tight in my chest like a spring wound to breaking. What if I simply stopped enabling him? The answer was becoming crystal clear, sharp and focused as bitter winter wind cutting through thin fabric. It was definitely time to take action. The realtor called again that same afternoon, her voice bubbly and excited like soda fizzing energetically over the rim of a glass. "Mr. Whitman, I've got a buyer ready and waiting. A young professional couple eager to move fast before the holidays. They're offering top dollar, full cash deal, no mortgage contingency." I hadn't signed anything official yet, but hearing the substantial number she quoted made my head spin dizzily like a carousel gone completely wild. It was more money than I'd ever seen in one place throughout my entire modest life, certainly enough to buy real freedom from financial worry. My hand hovered uncertainly over the paperwork spread across my desk, pen shaking slightly in my grip. Pain from my son's words agitated like a wooden splinter stuck deep under skin. Embarrass me in front of his fancy friends? After I'd handed him a home on a silver platter, asked nothing in return? This wasn't just cold business anymore. It was justice, fair and balanced, like finally balancing scales that had been tipped unfairly his way for far too long. Suspense built pressure in my chest. Would they close quickly? Could I really pull this off without him somehow sniffing it out beforehand? And I was absolutely ready to deliver that justice, sharp and final as a teacher's red pen marking a failing grade. On Christmas Eve, the neighborhood streets glowed with colorful lights twinkling like distant stars, families hustling past with bags overflowing with wrapped gifts. Churches rang their bells soft and merry, calling folks to traditional midnight mass services. I microwaved a frozen dinner, turkey and gravy that tasted exactly like cardboard, no better than cafeteria food, and sat completely by myself at the kitchen table, my fork poking absently at peas rolling lonely on the plastic plate. Pain agitated deep and constant, like a thorn twisting repeatedly in my heart. Unwelcome at my own family's gathering, cast out carelessly like yesterday's trash waiting for pickup. I imagined Marcus carving a real turkey with practiced skill, laughing easily with friends gathered around a warm, crowded table, pretending his father didn't exist at all, like I'd completely vanished into thin air. Loneliness burned steadily and transformed into hard resolve, hot as glowing coals buried under cold ash. That night, staring at the empty chair across from me where Margaret used to sit, I made my final decision. Suspense whispered urgently. What if he somehow found out too soon? Tomorrow morning, the house would no longer be legally ours. I'd sign the final papers at dawn, while the world slept off holiday cheer and turkey-induced comas. The next morning, while families everywhere were opening presents and laughing over coffee and cinnamon rolls, I sat in Franklin Dalton's quiet office signing away the house that had been my life. Page after page slid steadily under my pen. The official deed transfer, the detailed sale agreement, all properly stamped and notarized. Pain from my son's words agitated like a scab picked raw and bleeding. Embarrass him? I'd given him a roof, stability, a home for his family, and he'd slammed the door viciously in my face. Franklin nodded calmly, his expression professionally neutral. Once this is officially filed at the courthouse, it's final and binding. No turning back. My pen moved steadily across the pages without hesitation. Like crossing a bridge, I'd already burned completely behind me. By the time the ink dried on the last page, the house was no longer mine, or his. Suspense built heavily in my chest. How long until he felt the ground shift beneath his feet? And very soon, he would find out, the call coming like a storm gathering on the horizon. On December 26th, Marcus finally called me, his voice cheerful and casual like absolutely nothing had happened. Hey Dad, just checking in. Hope you had a good Christmas. Pain agitated, sharp and immediate. Good Christmas? Sitting alone with a cold frozen meal while he feasted without even thinking of me? My lips tightened into a thin line, but I kept my tone carefully even and controlled. It was quiet, I said simply. He chattered on about gifts and turkey and his kids' excitement. No apology offered, no mention of the invitation I'd never received. He didn't know yet, lounging comfortably in that house thinking it was forever his. Suspense coiled tight. Any second now, the realtor's notice would hit his mailbox. He had absolutely no idea the rug beneath his feet was already gone, yanked out while he slept peacefully. I said nothing more revealing, just waited patiently, heart thumping like a countdown clock ticking toward zero. Because his comfortable world was about to collapse completely, and I'd watch from a safe distance. A week later, a thick manila envelope arrived at the house like a bomb wrapped in plain brown paper. Marcus grabbed it casually from the mail slot, thinking it was routine junk mail or monthly bills. He tore it open without much thought, but Amanda's scream pierced the air first, sharp and panicked as a siren. "What is this?" she yelled, papers shaking violently in her trembling hand. He scanned them quickly, his face draining white as milk. The official sale documents stared back. House sold, closing date stamped bold and final. He called me minutes later, his voice cracking like thin ice under too much weight. "Dad, what is this? What did you do?" Pain from his Christmas snub agitated fresh, like deliberately poking a bruise that wouldn't heal. He'd rejected me, called me an embarrassment. I answered simply, "I did exactly what you told me to do, stayed out of your way." Suspense built in the heavy silence on his end. Would he beg or explode? And for once, he had absolutely nothing to say, the line going dead quiet. He drove over fast, tires screeching like a bad brake job, as he pulled recklessly into my apartment driveway. Storming into my living room, his face was red as a boiled lobster, fists clenched tight enough to turn his knuckles white. You can't just sell the house. My kids live there. Where are we supposed to go? He shouted, veins bulging like thick ropes on his neck. I stood tall despite my age, calm as ever, meeting his wild, desperate eyes with steady resolve. You mean my house? The one you said I'd embarrass you from? Pain agitated deep, his words from last month echoing like a bad dream that refused to quit, twisting the knife of betrayal harder. His mouth opened wide in shock, then closed slowly, like a fish gasping helplessly on dry land. He had no answer, no quick comeback prepared. Suspense hung thick. Would he physically swing or emotionally crumble? And in that heavy silence, I tasted victory for the first time, sweet as honey after years of bitter gall. For the first time in 5 long years, my son begged me like a child caught red-handed with his hand in the cookie jar. He pleaded desperately to undo the sale, his voice cracking repeatedly over the phone. Dad, please, think of the kids. We'll be homeless. Suspense built. Would I crack under guilt? Pain from his Christmas snub agitated like a splinter stuck under my fingernail. Embarrass him? He'd treated me like worthless trash. Now he was tasting his own bitter medicine. He promised frantically he'd treat me better going forward, invite me to every single dinner. Like mere words could somehow erase the deep hurt. I listened in silence, letting him squirm uncomfortably like a worm stuck on a hook. The same man who thought I was a burden now saw his comfortable world crumbling. My heart ached slightly. He was still my boy, after all, but my resolve held absolutely firm. But inside, memories of his Little League games flashed like old faded photos. Would I forgive or finish what I started? The line went quiet, waiting for my word. Amanda called next, her voice pure venom like a snake's threatening hiss. You're deliberately ruining our lives. Do you know how humiliating this is for us? Where will we go? She ranted on without pause, words flying like sharp arrows aimed straight at my guilt. Pain agitated fresh, my innocent grandkids caught in the crossfire, their sweet faces floating in my mind. But Amanda had backed his snub completely, smiling in those social media photos without me. I let her rage burn itself out until she was breathless, panting like a dog after a long chase. Then I replied calmly, maybe somewhere that doesn't embarrass you. Suspense hung. Would she beg to? She hung up without another word, the click final as a door slamming shut. But her anger was nothing compared to what came next, a darker storm brewing on the horizon. The day came fast, like a freight train barreling down tracks with failed brakes. A big moving truck pulled into the driveway early morning, its diesel engine rumbling like a grumpy bear waking up. Neighbors peeked from windows, watching as Marcus carried boxes out, his head hanging low like a whipped dog. His kids ran around crying, not fully understanding why their home was emptying like a popped balloon. Daddy, where are we going? The little one asked, tears streaking her face. Pain agitated deep, my grandkids caught in the mess he'd made, innocent as lambs in a wolf's den. I stayed inside, blinds drawn tight, my hands shaking not from guilt, but from the weight of years I'd carried alone. Suspense built. Would he lash out one last time? He loaded the last chair, slamming the tailgate hard. And when the door closed behind them, tires crunching gravel as they drove away, I knew a chapter had ended. His free ride over, my chains broken. When the last box was gone, the truck fading down the street like a bad dream finally waking, I walked through the empty house one final time. Bare walls stared back blank as forgotten pages, hollow rooms echoing my footsteps like lonely whispers. No more laughter from family dinners, no warmth from holiday lights, just echoes bouncing cold and empty. Pain agitated sharp. This place held ghosts of better days. Margaret's smile in the kitchen, our son's first bike in the garage. Yet here I was, letting it go after his betrayal cut deep as a rusty blade. Suspense lingered. Would buyers love it like we did? And yet, freedom washed over me like cool rain after drought. The house had carried too many ghosts, weighed me down like an anchor in deep water. It was time to let it go, sail free. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. The substantial check waited in my pocket, heavy with promise. The realtor handed me the final check at her office, the paper crisp and heavy in my hand like a ticket to a completely new life. It was more money than I could ever reasonably spend at my age, enough to cover comfortable years without financial worry. Pain from the Christmas snub agitated like a scab picked raw, his cold words echoing. embarrass us, while I'd handed him a home completely free. I thought about vacations I'd never taken with Margaret, comforts I'd denied myself to provide for him. For once, the sacrifice wasn't for someone else. It was for me. I folded the check into my coat pocket and smiled genuinely, the weight lifting like clouds parting after rain. Suspense whispered, "What now?" And I knew exactly how I'd use it, plans brewing quiet but sure. Marcus showed up again at my door, this time quieter, broken like a toy run out of batteries. He asked if I'd reconsider, if he could somehow buy the house back. His pride was gone, shoulders hunched low, eyes avoiding mine like a kid in trouble. Pain agitated deep. He was my boy, the one I'd taught to ride a bike in that same driveway. But I told him gently, "Son, respect isn't bought with money. You already sold your share when you called me an embarrassment." His eyes glistened with tears, the first I'd seen in years. Suspense hung. Would he fight or fade? He finally understood, but far too late, the door already shut. I used the money to travel, packing a small bag and hitting the road like a bird finally free from its cage. Pain from that empty Christmas still agitated like a hangnail you can't ignore, but each mile dulled it gradually. I visited places Margaret always dreamed of, the Grand Canyon, vast and red like nature's cathedral, Niagara Falls, roaring like 1,000 lions. At each stop, I carried a small photo of her in my pocket, pulling it out to whisper, "We made it, love." For the first time in years, I felt genuinely alive, wind in my hair, no more waiting for calls that never came. Marcus's absence no longer defined me, like shedding an old skin that had itched too long. Suspense whispered, would peace last? But his absence wouldn't stop the whispers at home, rumors brewing like storm clouds. Back in town, word spread fast like wildfire through dry grass. Neighbors whispered in grocery lines and over fences. Some called me cold as ice for selling the house. Others called me brave as a lion for standing up. Pain agitated like a thorn twisting deeper. Folks who'd waved hello now judged from afar, like I'd broken some unspoken rule. But privately, several confided at the coffee shop, "I wish I had the guts to do what you did." It turns out, many parents quietly suffer the same disrespect. Kids taking without thanks, treating elders like old furniture. My story became a cautionary tale, passed around like a hot potato. Suspense built. Would it change anything? And those whispers would reach his ears too, echoing back like a boomerang. One day, my oldest granddaughter Emma came to visit me at my new apartment. She was 10, with her dad's eyes but a heart soft as her grandma's. She hugged me tight around the waist, her little arms squeezing like she meant it. "Grandpa, I don't care what Mom and Dad say. I love you," she whispered, looking up with tears shining. My throat tightened like a knot in rope, pain agitating deep. Marcus's poison had reached her ears, twisting family ties like vines choking a tree. Whatever her parents thought, she had her own mind, seeing through their anger to the grandpa who'd pushed her on swings. "They said you were mean for selling the house," she added softly. I knelt down. "Sometimes grown-ups make hard choices, sweetie." She nodded, wise beyond her years. Suspense built. Would she tell them? And maybe, just maybe, the next generation would see the truth, free from his bitterness. The next Christmas, 1 year later, I used part of the money to rent a warm cabin in the mountains, logs crackling in the fireplace like old friends chatting. A few close buddies joined me, guys from teaching days who'd stuck by through the mess. We ate simple, ham sandwiches and pie from the store, laughed over old stories, raised glasses to family. The kind that chooses you, not the kind that uses you like a doormat. Pain from that empty holiday last year agitated faint, like a scar itching in cold weather, but for once, Christmas didn't hurt. It healed, warm as the fire chasing away shadows. No more waiting for invites that never came. Suspense whispered, would Marcus reach out? But for my son, that Christmas was the coldest of his life. Renting a tiny apartment, no tree, kids asking why Grandpa wasn't there. Whispers said he sat alone, regret heavy as snow. Now, when I look back, I don't feel regret. Pain from that Christmas snub still stings sometimes, like a cut that heals slow but leaves a permanent scar. Marcus wanted me invisible, out of his fancy dinner like an old sock in a drawer. So I gave him a taste of life without me, and without the roof I'd provided for years, no questions asked. I didn't do it to be cruel. though his desperate calls begging for help twisted my gut like a bad knot. No, I did it to remind him. Respect is earned, not owed like some bill you skip paying. He'd mocked me, shut me out, thinking I was just an old fool to push aside. But selling that house showed him actions bite back hard. And if he ever finds that lesson, swallows his pride like bitter medicine, maybe one day we'll share a Christmas dinner again, talk like family should. Until then, I live free, no more waiting for invites that never come. Suspense once kept me up. What if he fights dirty? But now, peace settles in like warm sun after rain. And that freedom is the sweetest gift of all, better than any wrapped box under a tree. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, comment, and smash the subscribe button. Also check out other videos on the channel. Joe's got more interesting stories for you.